persistent grid collapses, dilapidating infrastructure, lack of sufficient gas supply, electricity cuts. All these are challenges that have hindered economic growth in Nigeria's power sector. So, why has the sector continued to struggle over the years, and how will the Electricity Act 2023 bring about significant improvement? To better understand the Act, it is important to take a brief look at the history of power sector reforms in Nigeria. Let's break this down. In 2005, President Olusegun Obasanjo signed the Electric Power Sector Reform Act. By this act, the National Electric Power Authority (NEPA) was broken up into 18 companies, 6 generation companies, 1 transmission company, and 11 distribution companies. All were issued operating licenses. It was then that the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, was formed. In November 2013, under President Goodluck Jonathan, all 11 distribution companies known as DISCOs of the PHCN were sold to private investors. This move saw the privatization of 60% of the power sector. 40% remained under government control. Further reforms came with the amendment of the 1999 Constitution in March 2023 by President Muhammadu Buhari. The amendment was made to decentralize the power sector even more by allowing individuals and states to generate their own electricity. This was followed by the signing of the Electricity Act in June 2023 by President Bola Tinubu. The Act outlined the operational framework for state and individual involvement in power generation. In February 2024, updates were made to this Act, specifically addressing the concerns of communities hosting power generation facilities. The amendment requires power generation companies to allocate 5% of their previous year's operating expenses to developing these host communities. So, why is there a recurring theme of decentralization in these reforms? In Nigeria, there's not enough electricity to meet everyone's needs. 75% of electricity is generated from gas and 25% from hydroelectric power. Here's how it works. Power plants generate electricity, which travels through big power lines to substations. Then, it goes through smaller lines to homes and businesses. Nigeria needs about 33,000 megawatts of electricity for a stable nationwide supply. But despite having a generation capacity of 13,000 megawatts, it actually produces only about 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts. So, even though Nigeria could generate enough power for about 39% of its power demand, it is only making about 14% of what the country really needs. This is why Nigeria needs to spread out power production so more people can have reliable electricity. Decentralization allows for more equitable and sustainable access to power. Now, back to the Electricity Act 2023. This episode will look at 3 key changes introduced by the bill. First, the Act makes provision for states to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity on their own. To do this, however, states must create their own laws governing power-related activities. This process is revenue-intensive and requires input from experts, energy service companies, and legislative bodies. It can be quite complex. Currently, only 3 out of the 36 states, Lagos, Edo, and Kaduna, have such laws. Until other states pass theirs, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, will oversee electricity businesses there. Analysts warn against adding expensive power generation projects to states already struggling with infrastructure, security, and essential services. Some argue that fully privatizing and deregulating Nigeria's power sector is key to achieving real progress. But even privatization hasn't worked quite well in Nigeria. Only about 3 out of the 11 DISCOs that were privatized in 2013 are performing well. most are facing financial difficulties, including a debt crisis running into 3 trillion naira. This has led to operational problems and continued dependence on the government subsidies. Secondly, the Act emphasizes the development and utilization of renewable energy as part of NAG's objectives. It encourages various forms of renewable energy generation, such as wind, solar, small hydro, and biomass. The aim is to simplify licensing processes, regulate the integration of renewable energy into the grid, and support local content development. The Act also mandates tax incentives. The transmission and distribution system operators are required to facilitate connections for renewable energy generators within their coverage areas, with costs shared between the operator and the generator. The Act recognizes the importance of renewable energy in meeting Nigeria's energy demand, especially for rural electrification, considering the country's limited fossil fuel resources. A report showed that as of 2022, Nigeria had a total renewable energy capacity of 2.16 megawatts. If fully utilized, this can augment energy provision. Analysts suggest that renewable energy offers potential benefits, but emphasize the need for immediate focus on conventional generation methods, particularly gas. Thirdly, the Electricity Act 2023 governs how electricity tariffs and subsidies are regulated. It requires that when the NERC wants to change electricity tariffs, they make their proposals public, allowing stakeholders to provide input and raise objections. The Act also allows the government to provide subsidies for electricity to assist disadvantaged consumers. To determine who qualifies for these subsidies, the Minister of Power would work in consultation with the NERC. Furthermore, the NERC will assess large consumers to determine if they should pay different rates based on factors like electricity consumption patterns to ensure that everyone pays a fair amount without discrimination. The government would eventually gradually remove subsidies to ease the burden on public debt. This is seen in the recent tariff increase for Band A customers, who make up about 15% of electricity consumers and enjoy up to 20 hours of daily power supply. The tariff skyrocketed by over 300%, going from 66 naira to 225 naira per kilowatt. Bands B to C receive a minimum of 16 hours, 12 hours, 8 hours, and 4 hours of daily electricity supply, respectively. In 2024, the power subsidy is around 3 trillion naira, roughly 10% of the government's 28 trillion naira annual budget. After the tariff increase, the subsidy will decrease to about 1.8 trillion naira, a significant improvement on public debt. Some argue that the NERC did not follow the proper consultation process as required by the Act before tariffs were increased. Many Nigerians are expressing frustration over the suddenness of the decision without accompanying measures to cushion the impact of higher costs. Overall, the Electricity Act 2023 presents a promising framework, but its success depends on effective implementation. With more states taking control of their power generation, more electricity supply to rural areas, and reduced public debt, the power sector in Nigeria will see significant improvement. A better power sector will attract businesses, investments, enhance farming, create jobs, among other benefits.